So I've started making this video like 6 times now, and every time I've used this script, and it just doesn't quite feel right to me because I don't really feel like I am necessarily the channel that should even be talking about this to begin with. I feel like that there are larger channels who probably would do a better job because they have experience with this company and can kind of give their own 2 cents regarding the situation that I simply just don't have. And to that point, this whole Card Kingdom drama that's like cropped up over the last few weeks has really not been covered by other smaller channels either, because some of them also are sponsored by Card Kingdom, or perhaps they're hoping to be sponsored by them. And I feel like perhaps that really is sort of silencing a lot of the conversation around this. I think that Card Kingdom sort of put out their statement, it got brushed under the rug, and we're sort of moving forward. And I just don't think that that's good enough. I think that we need a better conversation surrounding this topic. And I think that there's points on both sides of this argument that we need to highlight, and I think that need to be propagated further so that this can actually get resolved for the company. And in addition to that, hopefully the larger channels who are currently sponsored by Card Kingdom can also put out some responses regarding the continuity of their sponsorships. So I guess that's really the reason I'm making this, because I feel like nobody else has, and if it's not going to be me, I don't know who else is going to make it. So here's the video. Here you go. So if you're not actually familiar with all of the Card Kingdom drama, essentially an employee recently put out a statement that was expressing their concerns about the toxic work environment at their Card Kingdom warehouse in Washington State. I feel like probably the best way for us to sort of move forward is for everyone to be on the same page, because some people might be wondering what drama, and other people, if you have already been made aware of exactly what's been going on, you can just skip ahead to the timestamp that's put up. But I'm going to put up the Reddit post, and I'm also just going to read it for you here. So if you're interested, this is the Reddit post. They say, "As an employee of Card Kingdom, please do not support pre-ordering singles here. The work conditions are horrible." This is a long one, so I apologize for it in advance. Me too. Let me start out by saying that everything here is written in the hopes of improving conditions for all my hardworking coworkers. That, and I also signed an NDA that hinders my speech. So forgive me if I leave out important details. I'm trying to avoid hyperbole so that people have a more accurate account. While I enjoy the company of many of my coworkers, I haven't had a worse employer in 15 years. Card Kingdom has changed a lot over the past few years, but most notably are the past 8 months. During this time, over 70% of the company has fired, quit, or can't relocate with the company to Monroe, Washington in 2 weeks' time. Most of the employees have been replaced by temps, and training to memorize additions has totally been dropped. If you've noticed errors with your orders, it's likely because someone was undertrained and underworked. I'll not be the only one to say that the company Card Kingdom treats its employees like expendables. Card Kingdom overworks its employees a surprising amount. During each pre-release event, Card Kingdom requires 2 weeks of mandatory overtime. Wizards has increased the rate of increases, and that means 2 weeks of mandatory overtime with less and less time in between. Many people worked 60-hour weeks for Lord of the Rings, Commander Masters, Wilds of Eldraine, Doctor Who, Lost Caverns of Ixalan, Ravnica Remastered, and of course, Murders at Karlov Manor. As a union, we finally were able to stop Card Kingdom from taking our PTO away from us if we couldn't work overtime. Specifically, employees were forced to use PTO to cover mandatory overtime hours that they could not work. Card Kingdom charges PTO for sick leave. You cannot take a sick day if you do not have PTO. If you call out sick without PTO, you'll be written up, and 2 write-ups disqualifies you from being able to apply for promotions, and 3 is termination. Plus, people have been getting fired for calling out sick more than the PTO that they have available, regardless of how legitimate their sickness is. I think one of the best examples of Card Kingdom's treatment of the employees was over the New Year's holiday. Mandatory overtime was required for Ravnica Remastered, and even though we received a quote-unquote paid holiday off, it didn't count toward our 40 hours worked, and we didn't receive overtime paid during that mandatory overtime week. My suggestion and request is that customers do not order pre-release singles from Card Kingdom. The cards will all still be available to people, but pre-ordering drives up the cost of the cards and tells the Card Kingdom executives that they should require more overtime hours. Card Kingdom is a shipping distributor that needs to make more and more money to cover the increasing investment that the company is making. Don't conflate a shipping company that burns through employees like coal with the game of Magic. Now, first, I just want to applaud the employee that actually wrote this. I think you can tell that there's way more underneath the surface. There's more tension, and there's also more specific circumstances that they want to express, but they can't because they're locked behind an NDA, which is interesting. And it's unclear from reading this. I mean, the NDA may be an agreement between the union and the company itself, and maybe it's exclusively placed by the company. And I'm not going to spend time speculating over this. I don't think it's really useful. And you can also argue that it was really dumb for the original poster on this Reddit post to sign an NDA in the first place to work for Card Kingdom. But you can guarantee that it was a requirement in order to sign on to work for Card Kingdom. And we're not going to get anywhere if we start blaming the individual for signing a mandatory document to work for a company. That's simply ludicrous. Now, we also have a further complicator in the form of the Card Kingdom statement released on February 26th, and I'll just go ahead and throw up that on screen now. And I use the word complicator because there are some inaccuracies here, likely from internal changes, maybe some that were even recent. For instance, Card Kingdom states that they cap the weekly hours to 50 during periods of required overtime. The original poster of the Reddit thread states that many people were working 60-plus hour weeks during the release of certain recent sets. Now, they also state in their statement that the overtime requirement is 10 hours spread over 2 weeks, which paints a very different picture than what the employee was expressing. Now, hang in with me here. I'm not calling out the employee. Stick with me. I have absolutely no idea what goes on behind closed doors. These numbers quoted by Card Kingdom could have also been recent changes that were not active during even the most recent Karlov Manor release. Perhaps a union negotiation took place to make these changes, and we simply just don't have that internal information. What I can get behind pretty much immediately is the insane number of MTG product releases, meaning that these periods of required overtime, as stated by the employee, are happening very frequently. It turns a normal job flow into, you have to work 2 weeks of normal work before going back to the accelerated schedule that is required during the periods of required overtime. Not to mention all the other card games and also hobby products that are apart from this. I imagine that it's a perpetual state of product release and overtime in the Card Kingdom warehouse, especially as they are trying to expand. What's more, it's hard to tell from the Card Kingdom statement whether or not the 10 extra hours during the busier times is actually a hard cap. They use the phrase exactly, "we ask our employees." And that could be a little legal speak to sort of get around the issue of having them work more. It could be a soft 10-hour recommendation more so than a hard and fast rule for it being 10 hours. And if that's the case, then I'm totally on board with what the employee has to say. And in fact, I am ready and willing to accept the fact that during those periods of overtime, they're working 60 plus hours individually per employee. So this actually raises another concern for me. Unions are a tricky thing, and I'm not going to sit here and just state that I understand exactly what it is to run a union or how difficult it is to run a union, because quite simply, I don't know. I'm not in a union. I have some personal experience with people like my father who worked in a carpenter union for a long time, but that is not the same as this. And in fact, it sounds like from reading other people's comments, also messaging other people on Reddit, and doing some further research on my own, that unions in this space, which is the gaming distribution world, are quite rare, in fact. And I don't think it's very common. So my educated guess here is that the union either is struggling or maybe it's just too new for its own good and it isn't able to properly represent the employees. It has me asking questions. So for instance, there should already be a ratified contract between the union and also the company. And if there isn't, why is there not one established already? My second one is the union representation lacking, or is the union not negotiating aggressively enough on behalf of the workers themselves? Now, this system, it sounds like, is absolutely necessary for those in the demanding jobs, such as warehouse work. As I mentioned, my dad was in a carpenter union for over 20 years, and without it, his retirement would still be quite far away, in fact. Unionization is absolutely necessary for many people working in these more demanding jobs. Now, I want to give credit where credit is due, of course. It does sound like that the union helped the employees eliminate the PTO discrepancy at Card Kingdom, which was requiring them to use PTO during the periods where they would miss an overtime shift. And I'm actually happy about this. It seems like a pretty fair ruling. It seems very in the middle and non-obstructive for the company. As long as the employee is fulfilling their base job requirements, that being the 40-hour work week that they signed on for, and something else in their life comes up that they can't get around, they absolutely should not be penalized for not being able to make it those 10 extra hours as quoted by the company. Those 10 hours might be caring for a dying loved one, or maybe less daycare costs, or more time with their children, or help account for literally any other unexpected event coming up that goes outside of normal working hours, because unfortunately the United States has this very rigid structure when it comes to like a 9 to 5 or maybe an 8 to 5 type of job. And so it's not always feasible for people to work outside of these hours because of various other life things. It just happens. And yes, there are going to be bad actors that take advantage of this. The people that call in sick when really there is no reason to. That's going to happen. That happens in literally every field. But I'd like to believe that most people are hardworking individuals that sometimes just need a little bit of help. And I think that this is the least that we can do to help those people that are in those tough situations. Now, I was a manager for 1 year at my prior employer, and this was before I signed on with my current job. And I was a part of various hiring decisions within the company. I hired various other providers and medical doctors, that sort of thing. I was at least a part of the discussion for those. And I can assure you that the hiring manager at Card Kingdom probably did express that this job would have certain requirements to be met. And I bet that they talked about them, such as the mandatory overtime or paid time off from the holidays not contributing to said overtime as expressed by the employee, or their policy requiring sick days to be deducted from their PTO, for instance. What you can't readily express to somebody, coming from my personal experience, is that especially as a hiring manager, you can't actually communicate the specific issues or maybe the toxic work environment that might be associated with your facility. There's certain things that you might want to leave out, for instance. And I'm by no means saying that my prior employer was like this. They were actually really great, but everywhere has issues, and you're more apt to sort of dance around the subject than actually confront it head on when you're desperately trying to fill holes within your company. It's just what happens. You're going to leave things out. And this to me sort of seems like the bigger issue at hand with this employee's statement. There's massive turnover, there's these burnout complaints, and then there's also frequent incorrect orders, which are coming up more and more often from Card Kingdom. This all points to a larger issue of the culture. It seems sort of rotten. And if at least it's not rotten, it doesn't seem like it's on firm grounds to begin with. And piggybacking off of this, Card Kingdom's statement does attempt to rectify some of these issues and also provide us with context regarding why they have made certain actions. But it comes off a little bit self-aggrandizing, and I also think that there's some veiled messaging happening here that it sort of slips over a lot of people's heads. They talk about how much notice that they gave their employees before the warehouse move, also the severance package that they offered to those who can't stay on with the company during this time, and then retention bonuses for those who chose to stay. And I'll be the first to say that a retention bonus could be anywhere from a few $100s for all we know, or just a very marginal dollar per hour raise for the average hourly employee, which means very, very little for the disrupted quality of life that these employees are otherwise experiencing by undergoing this massive move. A lot of people can't afford that to begin with, and this very small offset cost coming from this retention bonus, so to speak, probably isn't going to do anything to keep most employees, locked in with the company. We also have no details on the extent of the severance package. So a typical package provides 1 to 2 weeks of your salary per year of employment. So in the case of our, person that wrote this, it sounds like they've been there for maybe 8 years or so. So that would be 8 weeks to 16 weeks would be sort of the average. And that doesn't actually get you that far, if you are one of the employees that has to accept the severance package. Not to mention, they're probably given a very limited time frame to accept this. And it sounds like that was probably the case based on the employee's initial statement put out on Reddit. And then the warehouse move. This seems very unassuming on the surface, and I won't be making any claims. So what we're going to do today is hypothetically walk through what I would do if I was running a company with a unionized workforce that I really didn't want. Let's say the union was disrupting the bottom line of my company, and I might want it gone. I'm not saying I do, and I'm not saying that this is what Card Kingdom's doing. It's just my hypothetical universe that we're in now. What better way to do that than do a move to a completely new facility, forcing many of the unionized employees to quit? Because after all, my current warehouse is currently in a walkable neighborhood. So changing to a rural setting, which is what my company is going to be doing, you'll need a vehicle to get to work, and that will certainly disrupt the union size enough to potentially eliminate it. This is called union busting. It's a very classic thing that I, as the company manager, am doing. But why on earth did the union underneath me accept this move? Well, myself as the business owner, can just pitch that we're going to be paying half the cost per square foot in a newer, bigger, better facility, allowing us to expand the business, which is beneficial to everyone. It's a win-win, right? Now, all of this doesn't bode well for the company, and it does get to my final issue with this. I mentioned it briefly at the very beginning, which is not actually being discussed at large. What about all of the biggest shows, for instance, game nights, who are sponsored by Card Kingdom? I would hazard a guess that Game Nights is probably currently weighing their options, because you can bet that Card Kingdom is a massive contributor to the bottom line and their ability to pay wages within the company. Literally, the most recent videos that have been put out, for instance, on February 29th, and also some of their more recent releases, have all been sponsored by Card Kingdom. Now, this sponsorship in no way currently reflects Game Nights. I'm not saying that it's representative of Game Nights. I want to be very clear. But if they were to continue accepting sponsorship, I think it would probably look quite bad on Game Nights as a show. And I imagine that some eyebrows might get raised if they continue to accept the sponsorship from Card Kingdom. Now, I'd be very surprised if we don't see some sort of response from Game Nights. And again, maybe they just put something out that I've missed, unless, of course, that they signed an NDA. Was it too soon? But I know that Josh and Jimmy have always preached about promoting a healthy culture within their company, and they've also responded to sponsorship allegations in the past, namely with a certain predatory loan payout website. I'm not going to name them here, no reason to. If you happen to see further Card Kingdom sponsors in their videos, for instance, I would highly encourage you to just not prod them about it. They're likely locked into contracts, and there's probably some serious ramifications, especially financial ramifications, if they are to get out or breach that contract. The best thing that you can do, which I'm sure that you do anyway, is literally just skip the ads in the video, just move right on to the gameplay. Now, I want to go on record here and say that this is a tricky situation. It doesn't have a single correct answer, and I think that that's very apparent. I do believe that the conditions of Card Kingdom need to change, which will require a definite upheaval within the current company landscape. And that won't be coming from a single person. Likely the union will need to clamp down, and then the employees will need to stand up for the company or to the company for any real change to actually happen. So recently, local nurses in my area, just within the past couple of months, went on strike until their union finally got them favorable working conditions. It shouldn't have to be this way, but it is. And you have to play the game in order to make the changes. So like it or not, we have to go through this process. Sometimes you have to gather and push back. We as a community can voice our support. We can also raise concerns, but really the change that matters, the change that needs to happen, will happen physically at the location. Be kind to those that are still locked into contracts with Card Kingdom. And remember that if you were the person who was trying to figure out how to pay your employees despite losing a major sponsor, you would hope that the community would show you some grace, and you would hope that they would be understanding that you're taking time when you're making your decision. And that's it. Subscribe and watch my videos for more people to see. Support my addiction so I can support your addiction. And I've been Kyle. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.